So in the past, we have talked about purchasing and buying vehicles. Well, today we're going to look at purchasing and buying or renting a place to live. So that's what we're going to look at today. Most teens can't wait to be out of the house. Well, that day is quickly coming for a lot of you. And so we're going to look at the kind of different parts of buying a house, what we need to look for, and also the banking side of it. We'll look at the different type of mortgages that we can get if we're going to purchase a house. First thing we're going to look at is renting. And the first thing you'll probably sign when you first go rent your first apartment is a lease. So let's define what a lease out is. A lease is a written agreement between the landlord, the person that owns the place, and the tenant, who would be the renter, that details the amount of rent and the length of time the apartment will be rented. Typically on the lease, there's going to be other things in there as well, like what the homeowner, the person that owns the house, will take care of versus what the renter will take care of. Personally, on my house that I own, that I rent out, one of the things that I take care of is lawn maintenance so it doesn't get too gross. I also typically take care of snow removal so that it gets moved and there's not an issue with snow remaining on the sidewalks when there shouldn't be. So that's what a lease is. Typically, when you go rent a place, you will sign a lease with the owner. For those more financially capable, you may even find yourself in a place you own. That could be purchasing a house. There's a couple different types of houses you could buy. It could be a single family or a condominium. Both dwellings require you to actually purchase the property, but differ in some responsibilities. Maintaining your home is an expense that a lot of people don't think about. It requires a lot of time as well as money. Mowing lawns, shoveling snow, making repairs to keep the average homeowner very busy. Some people prefer not to be responsible for these chores. So the two different types of places that we could purchase would be a single family home. That is a single family home is a standalone house. The owner is responsible for all maintenance and upkeep. That means if you buy a home, something breaks down, you're paying for it. And so that's why typically they say you can't spend all your money on it because you have to spend money on it later on. So that's a single family home. That's a majority of what it would be here in Hayes. You get into bigger cities, they're going to have a lot more condos. A condo then is an individual apartment that can be purchased. The owner owns everything from the walls inward and is responsible for maintenance inside those walls. So you purchase a condo, it would be in a larger building, but it would just be part of that building. And you as an owner of that condo would be responsible for any repairs that would need to happen inside of the condo. Where if something broke out in a shared space, maybe in a hallway or something on the outside, that would be the actual condominium's owner, the people that own the entire building. So that's the difference to the two different types of places that you can buy. Since 1980, the average person devotes about, and this is kind of a big number here, probably should be big, bold, and beautiful, they devote about 25% of your monthly income to rent. So that's kind of a fair assessment, an approximation of what you should be contributing to the amount of the value of the house that you're living. And now rent's nice because when you guys get into college or maybe you're just out, one of the things you do to lower the amount of rent you pay is have roommates. And that's something that why a lot of younger people do that is to be able to afford maybe a slightly larger place if you could split the costs. But here, if you're buying a home, renting a home, you want to try to keep that to about 25% of your monthly income. So if you make $4,000 a month, which is $48,000 annually, that's well above the median here in Hayes. Before taxes, you should be looking for places around $1,000 a month, and that's because 1,000 over 4,000, you can see what happens to those zeros, is going to be 1/4. So you're hoping you can keep it around there. Now the nice thing, again, if you're young and you want to share that $1,000 a month, you could cut that down drastically and start saving money to possibly purchase in the future. Okay? The difference, a big difference between renting and buying is if you're renting, you're paying somebody else to live there. You don't get a chance to resell that house. But if you can purchase either a home or a condo, you get to pay in to that home, and when you sell it, you'll get that money back. Because remember, we've talked about how a home is typically one of the few purchases you buy that is an appreciating asset that you can own. So there's the difference between the two types of homes that you could purchase or even rent. So let's look at example one right here. Now remember that 25% number. This 25% number is a big number right here. That's something that a lot of people would tell you, financial people would tell you, try to keep your home ownership around 25% of your monthly income because you're going to need money for other things. You're going to need to put money away to start saving. We've talked about the different types of savings accounts that we could have. And so you want to try to keep your rent or your lease or your mortgage payment around a quarter of what you make. So example one starts giving us an example here of Alex makes $61,992. Now that's per year. And he pays about 28% of that of his gross monthly income in federal and state taxes. Remember, the two certainties in life are death and taxes. You're always going to pay taxes. He wants to find an apartment to rent. Estimate how much he can afford to pay for rent each month, then determine how much money he will have after taxes and rent are paid. Now remember, this is of the gross monthly income, so I do want to review that. This is of the gross monthly income, not net. So gross is what we make before taxes and all that is taken out. All right, so first off, we need to figure out what his monthly rent is. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this value, this 61,992, that's dollars per year, and we're going to divide that by 12 because there's 12 months in a year, so we can figure out his monthly income. If we do that calculation, we'll find that that's $5,166, and that's per month. So we calculated his per month gross income. Now remember, they said, financial people say, that you want to try to keep your rent to about 25% of your monthly income. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our monthly income, $5,166, and we're going to take 25% of that, which is 0.25. Right? We can multiply by 1/4, 22 over 100, but I just like to do 0.25. So if we do that calculation, 25% of our monthly income would be $1,291.50. So most financial people would say you could hopefully keep your monthly payments, whether it be rent or whether it be a mortgage payment, to around $1,291.50. You want to try to keep that to your monthly rent. All right, so we'll go ahead and label that a monthly rent. So as we start going to look for homes, that's about what we need to stay at. Now the other question here said, then determine how much money he will have left after taxes and rent are paid for the month. So remember, we're going to make $5,166 per month. Of that money, of that $5,166, 28% goes to taxes. So I'm going to take 5,166 times 28%. That means we're paying $1,446.48 in taxes. We know that we can afford, hopefully, $1,291.50 in rent. So if we add those two values up, well, I'm not even going to add them up. I'm just going to subtract those two values from my monthly payment. So remember, I'm making about $5,166 a month. I'm going to pay, so subtract out $1,446.48. And then my rent's going to be $1,291.50. So if you remember back a month or two ago, this is looking like our budget, except we had that budget nice and organized in Excel. When we subtract those two out, we'll find that we have $2,428.02 to take care of the rest of the costs that we may incur. So remember, out of this $2,428, that's where all our bills come from. That's where all our food comes from. That's where all our entertainment, remember, it should be a small part, especially while you're younger and trying to save money. So here's how much money we will have left to take care of the rest of those bills. And remember, we had a list of those expenses that we can incur. in our Excel project that we did some time ago. That's number one. So we calculated how much he would pay in taxes, how much he would pay, how much he should pay. It's not necessarily his rent. Maybe he could find somewhere cheaper, but then we can subtract that out and figure out what we have left for all our other expenses. Okay, let's move on to number two. So Bethany's monthly gross. Now notice what they gave us here. They didn't give us the annual. They gave us the monthly gross. So what the monthly gross is that is the income that you make before taxes are taken out. That's not what your paycheck is, okay? Your paycheck that you get to put in the bank is your net, okay? So this is the monthly gross before all our insurance, maybe our taxes are taken out, or any other thing that our employer may take out for us. So that's what this cost is. She wants to rent an apartment that will cost her $1,800 a month. So she's looking, can I afford this place that's $1,800 a month? Will she be able to make the payments if she follows the 25% rule? That's why they have that 25% rule, because if you keep it at or under 25% of your gross income, you should be able to afford all the other things that you have or that you need to take care of. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that 3,840. I'm going to find 25% of that. So 25% of 3,840 is $960. So that's what she should be paying per month in order to afford 25% for her apartment plus all the other expenses that she's going to have throughout the month. Well, if she is supposed to spend that and the rent's $1,800, should she rent that place by herself? I would say no. She cannot afford to pay that much in rent. She can't afford $1,800 per month. Okay? So she won't be able to afford $1,800 unless, maybe her and a couple friends go in and they split that cost. So you can imagine if she found a buddy to go with, one, and you divide that rent by two, that would be $900 per month. Well, then she could swing that. Or if you divide it three ways, that would be $600 per month. She could swing that. But by herself, no. So one of the issues you'd run into if you possibly did roommates is maybe one of them switches jobs and has to leave, and then that could put you in a bind of either having to pick up their part of the rent for that month, or you might have to go find somebody else to sublease and to take over that lease that person may have signed. So that's something that's it could be an issue with finding a roommate to split that cost. All right, so let's move on to number 3. When finding an apartment and signing a lease, it isn't enough to just have the first month's rent on hand. I can tell you right now from experience, the lease that I have my tenant sign for the rental I own, they have to come up with more than just the first month's rent. They have to come up with a deposit as well. And I just do a month's rent as my deposit, just in case there's issues. I had an issue in a rental I owned where the girl that was living downstairs tracked in all sorts of grease and grime on the carpet. I had to clean that and have it cleaned. I took that out of her lease. So she very easily could have taken her shoes off in the mudroom and not tracked in all that, but she chose not to. So I kept part of the lease to clean up the carpets for that. So there's a lot going on here. There are a number of fees that also can be needed when signing a lease. There's application fees. There's deposits to hold. Again, I typically do a month's rent as a deposit. Security deposits are a few things when applying for an apartment. So deposits are usually refundable. So what I do, I've had a lot of tenants that have taken care of the place. And so when they move out, I go in, I do a walkthrough with them, just like I did when I rented it to them. And if everything's okay, I'll just cut them a check for their deposit, and they'll get all their deposit back. So that's why they say deposits are typically refundable unless you trash the place, then you're going to lose your deposit. So security deposits are assessed to protect the landlord in case you, the tenant, cause any damages to the property or vacate early and break your lease. I've had that happen where somebody just upped and left and they gave me a week's notice. Well, I kept their deposit to take care of the rest of the month's rent. And so they lost their deposit because they gave me like a week's notice, and it was a week into the new month, and they didn't pay that rent. So I just kept their deposit to pay that. So that's something that can also happen. If you break that lease, you can lose your deposit. So Rufus and Maria paid a $200 application fee. So here's all their fees up front. These are upfront fees just for renting a place for a $1,595 apartment. Now, in addition to that first month's rent, because typically when you sign the lease, you pay for the first month. Now, if you're halfway through the month, they may prorate that out. Okay, I'll write that word down. They may prorate that out and just do it by day for the first month's rent. So let's say you sign the month lease on the 20th. They're probably not going to make you pay for those first 20 days. They'll divide that monthly out by the number of days and make you pay for how many days are left in that month. Okay, so that's something a lot of tenants will do, or a lot of renters will do. So they're required to provide a credit report, which is $25. So that's another fee they have to do. And they have to pay a security deposit equal to 1 month's rent. That's what we were just talking about. The landlord also requires the last month's rent. So this is trying to, the landlord kind of covered his backside that if they move out just all of a sudden early, they're making them pay the last month's rent up front too. Now, if you give them a month's notice, say, hey, it's December, I'm moving out December 1st, I'm moving out January 1st, I'm just going to apply that payment, that last month's rent payment to this month. Is that okay? And my lease is up in January 1st, so I'm done. That's what they'll do. The landlord will just keep that last month's rent that they collected up front and use that. So how much should they expect to pay to be able to move in the apartment? So we'll just start a list right here. This would be something handy for an Excel spreadsheet right here. So the first thing they're going to have to cover is the first month's rent. Most owners are going to charge you for the first month's rent up front. So you're going to pay, if you move in January 1st, you're paying for the entire month of January right away for the right to live there. And that was $1,595. So that's your first payment. Well, then we have that application, so that $200 application deposit. So we have that application deposit, so we're going to go ahead and list that. And that's going to be $200. So we have to add that on. Then we have that credit report. So they're going to charge us $25 for the credit report to make sure that we have decent credit, so that the renters don't leave them high and dry with a lease that they're not going to finish or can't afford to pay. All right, so we got that. Now we've got our deposit. Typically, you just write one check for everything. So typically, this is what the owners will do, is your deposit will be 1 month's rent, which is the $1,595. Okay? So when I do my rental, that's what I do. I do the first month's rent, and then I do a deposit, which is the first month's rent as well. So they have 2 months' rent due up front. Now the deposit, remember the deposit, take care of the place, you'll get all of that back. And then now this owner is going to do the last month's rent as well. So we have to count that in there. And that's another $1,595. So this is all that you would be expected to pay up front. So they're paying 3 months rent, but you're only paying 2 months rent. This deposit you'll get back at the end when you check out and your lease is up and you're moving out and you take care of everything. So all we have to do is we have to total these up. So in that first payment to the landlord, we would end up writing a check for $3,415 just to live there for 1 month. Now remember, this deposit you'll get back, and then the last month's rent, when you decide that your lease is up that last month of the lease, that will just take care of that payment, and the owner already has that, so you don't have to pay that last month's rent. If you're moving out January 1st and you tell them December 1st, hey, my lease is up, I'm not going to renew my lease, I'm going to move out, they'll just apply that last month's rent to your last month's rent and take care of that for you. All right, so you can go on and look through the rest of this. Next class, we're going to go in and look at some different types of mortgages that if you're going to purchase a house or a condo. So go ahead and finish the work. If you have any questions, come in and see me in Pride Time. Thank you.